Hey, Grbavica, open wound. A heavy sadness weighs on me, and for a moment I can see that you're different now. Hey, Grbavica, you're sick. I see your streets from afar, where I left my childhood pictures. All that is me is left there. Grbavica is a working-class neighborhood in Sarajevo that was heavily shelled during the Serbian siege on Bosnia's capital from 92 to 1996. The song To Grbavica was written in 1994, the year Ivica Osim moved to Graz to coach Sturm. Ivica Osim is from Grbavica, and so is Željezničar Sarajevo, the railway workers club, and Osim's home. This song is now the club's anthem. Time, the Miljacka River separates me from you. That river separated Serbs from Bosniaks in the war. And I don't know when, but I know that I will come home to you. And then I see Željezničar's stadium. I see your pride. I'll lay down my life, but never give up on you, because my life is you. Welcome back to Sarajevo. We're still on the 35th floor of the Avas Tower, the highest building in the Balkans, overlooking the city that Ivica Osim left behind as the siege began to coach at Panathinaikos Athens. His family was supposed to follow, but had to stay behind for almost 2 years as Sarajevo was under siege by Serbian Yugoslavian troops. In Athens, Osim lives on a houseboat with satellite communication so he could maintain contact with his loved ones. The houseboat belonged to the president of that club. And 2 years later, he moved to Graz to be closer to his home and to coach Sturm and transform our ideas about football and my ideas about the world as well. This is the second part of a two-part roadcast type of episode. If you're listening into this and you haven't listened to episode 1 before, from 2 weeks ago, I would strongly encourage you to go there first. After Osim died in Graz, my hometown, on May 1st, 2022, on Sturm Graz's 113th birthday, the club hosted a ceremony to honor his memory and send his casket off on its last journey to Sarajevo, Osim's home. I watched from my office in Indiana, connected to my dad, who was in the stadium at the ceremony. And then the casket was wheeled out of the stadium to chants from our curves, Volimo te, Ivica Osim. There were a lot of flowers and memorials and gifts and things that went with Osim on his last journey. Among them was an orange plastic strap that streetcars have inside to hold on if you can't find a seat. Osim was very tall, and whenever he stood, and he mostly stood on the bench, he reached kind of awkwardly up with his hand. And so eventually, Sturm had one of these holding straps placed for him in the old ground and then in the new stadium as well. My dad, who worked for the public streetcar company in Graz, had placed that strap there with the other gifts. And it was headed to Grbavica, to Sarajevo now. And 3 years later, I was too. This trip, these moments are what I told myself I would do on that funeral day. And I'm grateful I get to take you along.
Ali ako ništa drugo je ono što jedino što mogu da učim za taj grad, bar se vi sjetite da sam se rodio u Sarajevu, a znate šta se dešava. Toliko.
My resignation is the only thing that I can do for my city, Osim says here. You need to remember that I'm from Sarajevo. You know what's happening there. This was his goodbye to Yugoslavia, a country that was no more. Cultures, Osim said once, were cultures because they didn't fight wars. Now the war was in his hometown, and it took the culture he loved the most, soccer. That team, he said about the last Yugoslavian national team, which he coached to the Euros in 1992, that team was far, far better than the country. But it would be a fantasy to lament that generation of players and not to talk about what happened afterwards. Lots of people were killed. The country was destroyed. Sometimes there are things that are more important than football. That team that was far better than the country included Serbs and Croatians and Bosniaks and Slovenians. And all those people were now shooting at each other. Ivica Osim left Yugoslavia, but Yugoslavia never left him. Perhaps he is what some have called him. He's the last Yugoslav. For me, he was about to become the professor back then in the 90s. Nedim Hasanbegovic hosted me here in Sarajevo. He was the door opener to the stadium, my guide to the cemetery from the last episode. And despite the fact that he's younger than me, a historian of Osim and of Željezničar in its own right, he works at the Avas Tower and had suggested that coffee spot to record our conversation up on the highest floor. We overlooked the hills around the city where Serbian troops had stood, shelling, sniping into the city for years. We saw the train station and its lay of the land in the city, and I saw why Željezničar means the railroad workers. And we talked about Osim, about Sarajevo, about our dads, and more our memories, as well as our lessons from the professor. I'm resigning so that the people may remember what's happening in Sarajevo.
Yes. Because you know what's happening in Sarajevo, and that you remember that I came from Sarajevo, in the Stadium of Partizan in Belgrade.
What is happening in Sarajevo?
So after we declared independence, the brutal attacks came from the Serb side, organized by the president of Serbia in that time.
This is officially the People's Army of a country that's falling apart, commandeered, run by... It's an ethnic army.
It's just a war, and it's the longest siege in the history after the World War II, over the around 1,400 days. And I think that was something that left a brutal mark in the city, so over 3 years. And the war ended in November 1995, where the agreement was signed, and that Bosnia will be an independent country, but it will be split into entities. And during that war, it left a brutal mark on even on the city, but in the country. But even now in the city, when you walk through, when you see the buildings, when you talk to people, it's brutal. And the city tries to recover, but that's something that you'll always remember, and that is why it says such a big figure here, because he did something very emotional that was very emotional for people back then, and he showed what in the toughest moments, in the toughest place to be at the moment. I mean, Belgrade was not easy to be. If you are saying stuff like that, he showed he really showed the passion, I would say, for the city, because that every time when his name is mentioned, you can see that press conference. And I think that speaks a lot about him.
When I was a young kid, I caught some wind of what's happening here, and I told you as we were driving here to go up on the 35th floor of this highest building here and look down, that I remembered hearing Sarajevo is under siege, they're shooting from the hills all around the city. And I'm from a rather flat part of Austria. Now that I'm sitting here and I can look around, and in the far distance, it's still hills and mountains. I can see how the city must have been completely
it was practically cut off. And I need to talk about the stadium in the war, because it's something that's really, really emotional for all of us.
That's a great connection. Yeah.
On the part where the stadium is Grbavica, before the war, mostly people from the army lived there, so Serbs from the army. In the war, Grbavica was not under our control. So most of the city, Grbavica was never under the control of the army of Bosnia and Herzegovina. It was under the control of the Serbs. So that's how close they were. Just one bridge is between them and us. And the stadium was burned. On the 4th of May, 1992, the stadium was burned. The west stand, the stand where everything the trophies, etc., were there. Everything was burnt. A lot of memorabilia, and especially you can see those. There's a video when the stadium is getting burned. It's very emotional for everybody. That's why the stadium is so important to us.
I was at the stadium today, and Armin, your friend, told me there's not a lot of trophies in the press room. He didn't explain why. That's why.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's okay. We only had one big trophy, but you had small trophies when you went to tournaments. You had some kids.
It's a kind of an archive, right?
Yeah, and a lot of documents from that period were burned, and the pitch was completely bombed, and it was. It was definitely different than it was, and people always say when they came back in '96 that was super emotional for them, and also the north stand, it was completely devastated. So I think the stadium was, let's say, was a part of many battles, and that's why when you talk about our club, you can never forget what this stadium means to us.
Where are the Željo fans during the war? How many of them are fighting? How many of them are falling? How many of them are staying home? Does the club keep playing in some form or shape?
So, just want to mention one fact before the street that is going past. So you see the stadium is pretty much in the center of this neighborhood. The street that is passing, like near the stadium, is named Ivica Osim.
It's the Ivica Osim Boulevard.
Yes.
Something that Graz still hasn't managed to do. By the way, if anybody is listening this from Graz, and I know some are, keep the pressure off. There is still no decent Ivica Osim street in the city. Sarajevo has one.
Yeah. We had. I think last year we got this one, and we even wanted to do it before he was born, but it's not, let's say, it was not practical, etc. So we did it after he died, and he
don't do any naming while people are still living. Graz did that by naming its stadium after Arnold Schwarzenegger, and then we had to take it off again. So good you did it when you did it.
Yeah. So your question regarding the fans. So
yeah,
I was talking to how the South Stand was building now. The South Stand will be named after Javad Begit Jildan. He was a leader of our fans. So the Ultras group was created in 1987, the Maniacs. You had the Blue Tigers, you had joint unions, but the Maniacs was the group, and it's really, I would say, it's the biggest in the country, one of the biggest in the region. The South Stand will be named after him, and he was the leader of our fans. And on the 11th of July, 1992, he died by a sniper rifle. He was saving a lady that was shot. He was trying to save her, and while he was trying to save her, he was killed. And now every 11th July, 11th July has a big meaning in our history because of the genocide in Srebrenica. But also 11th of July of 1992 was the day when he was killed. And every year on that date, our fans gather to the place where he died to just to leave the flowers and remember him, because he was somebody that is a personification, I would say, of how and a lot of our fans died during the war, because that's what happened. We didn't have an army. We just have a lot of people that gathered together and fight for their families. They fought for their, I would say, the life they knew. And this Grbavica part was brought back to, let's say, to Sarajevo on 19th of March 1996.
Okay.
Maybe 19 March 1996, and that was one of the most, I would say, I know my father, he didn't live in that part, but he told me that was one of the most emotional days for the people, because they returned back to their homes, and they were kicked out 4 years ago. Many of them didn't have a chance to leave that part, so they were living under a Serb for 4 years. That was not really a pleasant experience. And a lot of people, when they first entered that part of the city, they went to the stadium. They wanted to see what was happening. And on the 1st of May, in the May of 1996, the first game was played in the stadium after the war. It was a derby against our city rivals, and that game is by many something that ended the war. That was because the city came back to normal. The football came back to the city, and that was something very important to everybody.
You said the game that ended the war. I'm sure you know there's also the myth of Maksimir, the game that began the war, right? Zvonimir Boban kicking the officer of the People's Army, and you can listen to this in an earlier episode with Dario Brentin. And this, as a game that ends the war, I love that Sarajevo contribution.
For us, yes. I mean, for the fans of my club, for the fans of Željo, I think that game was very emotional. And the first ball, let's say, was played by our president in the war. I mean, he was our president even after the war, and the stadium was fully packed. And I would say nobody cared much about the result. I mean, it was 1-1, but nobody cared about the result. It was mostly about gathering the people back together. Everybody was preparing the pitch together, cleaning the stands, etc. And we didn't have much, but I think for the people back then, that was everything. If you are asking me about the club during the war, it pretty much didn't exist. I mean, because a lot of our players went to they took a gun and they defended the country, they defended the city. So after '96, the club was pretty much very poor. The stadium was destroyed. And then I would want to mention the '98, the 5th of June, 1998. We won our first title after the war. And that happened in maybe after the war, the biggest game at least what my father tells me. And we celebrate a lot that game, so I think that's it. We played a one-game final, so it was a playoff final. So it was a kind of a system.
The league was run in a kind of a cup playoff format.
Yeah, so after the league, it went to playoffs, etc. And it was just a one game. So a big final in the Stadium Koševo, stadium of our rival. It was us against FK Sarajevo. The situation totally different. Everybody was expecting they will destroy us, they will beat us 4-5-0. They had the money, they had the politicians back then, they had everything. We didn't have anything, to be honest. It was mostly players from our youth academy, and they dominated the game. And in the 90th minute, the guy from our academy scored a goal. We won 1-0. I mean, 0-1 for us, and it was. My father is something that's two games he always talks about. So first one is the loss in 90 minutes against Vidauton in 85, and the second is this win. He was there, and he said it was unbelievable. He thought he would die of happiness. And every 5th of June, we, let's say, celebrate that victory again and again. And then we ask the rivals, do you remember 5th or the 6th? Because
I'm sure they do.
It will never. Yeah, they definitely do. It will never happen again. One game at their stadium, the final, after the war, it will never happen again. And I think they will change all of the victories just for that one. But they cannot change that.
Let's return to Ivica a little bit. He is out of the country by then, resigns in Belgrade, and then eventually in Graz. Is his time in Graz remembered at all here? Is it on the horizon what he is doing to Sturm? And I think that's the right framing of he's changing the identity of this club. This is, like Željo, the workers' club. Sturm never played pretty football before. And Osim, with all his ideas and his grace and his odd commentary, to manage to merge that workers' club identity with an idea of beauty and meaning in the game that we have. It was from another planet, and his transformation of Sturm into what it is today, I think, is the most important phase of the club's history. Anybody has any time to look at Graz and at what he's doing during these 90s?
I think that period was I was saying that period was a little bit even tough to follow because, I mean, the media was not as now. You cannot just watch any games. I think his work in Graz was started to be appreciating after that. And I think we recognize how important he was to Graz after he died. Because what happened when he died there, how many people paid respect to him, what happened in the stadium, I think that really showed us how important he was to Graz, also in Japan.
In Graz, I think you'd hear many different parts of the Osim legacy. You'd hear there's the Sturm story, of course. But he studied mathematics, he studied philosophy, and his interviews always sounded so different from any other football coach. So there is that side. And then there is the symbol of a country that is no more, and the symbol of this very new country, Bosnia, as well. Would you say it's the same for you, the same parts of that Osim puzzle?
I think he has a one phrase which is now often used, and where he tried to describe what is Želja for him. And I will try to rephrase it. He said it's not just about football. It's how you live your life. It's you go to the bridge near the stadium, you talk to your friends, you go to the game together. It's not just football. It's definitely a way of living. It's more than that, and I think that shows how he thought about life. It was not how many people think. It's not just something simple. I think he was always 10 steps above everybody in that way. How his thinking was unbelievable. And after, he had health problems, and when he came to visit the stadium, the team, everything, he wasn't, let's say, he was pretty much slow in thinking, slow in speaking. But when he speaks, everybody listens because his words were very, I would say, very, very rich. If you know what I want to say, when he says something, it has a meaning.
He thought about it, and not often. Sometimes that meaning wasn't even clear to us immediately. It had to sink in for a minute or two, and then you would go as a simple football fan, and okay, here is how the game connects to life.
Haben Sie Angst vor der ersten Niederlage?
Was für Angst? Wissen Sie,
Sportlich.
Mit Krieg in Bosnien, mit alles.
Sportlich.
Are you afraid of the first defeat? The reporter asks here, and Osim replies, what kind of fear? Just think of what's going on in Bosnia.
Kann ich nicht mehr Angst haben. Was kann passieren? Das Präsident sagt, dass ist nicht mit mir zufrieden und muss gehen. Was ist das?
I can't have fear anymore. What's going to happen? That the president isn't happy with me? Then I can go?
Kann man gehen.
And he did have a knack for these kinds of quotes. There is one from Sturm as well, where he said, and this is not immediately after a game, but I think in preparation for a season, Sturm covers everything that's black in my life, and everything that's white too. And our colors, of course, are black and white.
Was that a banner when he died that was held in the stadium?
That is a banner that hung across the entire Nordkurve when he died, and the banner still exists, and it's still gotten out for May 1st every now and then.
Yeah, I think that is just showing what he is, and that he is definitely more than a football figure. I would also just want to say something about how he understood football. In 2008, he was part of a television in Croatia, and there he told, if you cannot run, you cannot play football. And okay, maybe somebody understood it then, but the football then was not as it's now. It's not high pressing. It's not a lot of statistics, data. And now when you look at it, he was definitely right. If you cannot run, you cannot play. That's definitely so simple, so short, but that's definitely showing true. And even his football back in the 80s, it was fullbacks overlapping, the offensive, playing on the first ball. When my father watched Guardiola and in Barcelona as a coach, he definitely mentioned that how the club played in, let's say, the 80s. I think that's honorable to him.
Sorry, go ahead.
I just want to mention also the Japan, how much appreciated was he and his...
Can I just say something about the running here? Because it's hard for maybe even your generation, you're younger than me, to imagine. You've seen enough older games to know how radically different football looked like. We grew up with Premier League, and whatever global tournaments, the speed at which the game goes now. I mean, if you watch games from the 80s, early 90s, it's very common for just the guy who has the ball happens to run, right? And the rest is trying to position themselves around it. Osim had a very different, very fluid understanding of the game. And I remember also these first training sessions, when we observed, he doesn't look very athletic. All the players started reporting, we have to have the ball at our feet all the time, and we have to run with the ball all the time. In training, this is completely new. It was prophetic. I think in that sense, I think his understanding of the game, was.
I think that is just something that shows how much ahead of his time. What he was definitely, even football-y, even if you just look at the football, but even if you look at the philosophy and the way of his thinking, he was definitely ahead of his time.
Valery Lobanovsky at Dynamo Kiev with the 4 in defense, and Osim around the world on offense. I think those are the two prophetic coaches of the 90s, I would say.
Yeah. I would also say that, and I'm really sad that I couldn't be a fan. I couldn't be born when he was a coach, because I would definitely love to see his team play. And if you compare where the club is now, and I mean, it's just modern football. And back in the days, you could have something special without no money. Now it's really, really hard, especially at the state of the country, etc. And for a small club from Bosnia to play in a semi-final of that competition, which was sometimes even stronger than the Champions League because of the quality of the teams. I mean, Real Madrid won that year. That's definitely something that I'm sad that I couldn't remember, that I couldn't be a part of it.
The European football landscape definitely looked different. Yes. You were going to mention Japan.
I want to mention also his time in Japan his time in Japan was not, let's say, remembered here when he was there, but now when you look how Japanese paid respect to him, and he almost died there because he had a heart attack. His health was not really good there, and they took care of them. And because he showed them what was football, he brought a totally different perspective of football to Japan. And people in Japan will not forget that. And I know there was a funeral, and even now, they are always remembering him, always talking highly about him. We have guests. I think 2 years ago, one older man from Japan came to the stadium, and when we asked him why, he said only because of Ivica. And if somebody is willing to travel the whole world to pay respect for just, to be honest, a football coach, that just shows that he wasn't a football coach. He was much more than that.
He died in Graz on May 1st, 2022. My dad called me and told me, how did you learn about it? How were those days between his death and the funeral?
So I remember I was at my friend. We were watching, I remember like it was yesterday, Everton-Chelsea. So I remember, I know where I was at that moment. And I get a phone call from a friend that I'm not so close. I mean, we play football sometimes. I know him from the games. And the only topic that we have is the club. And I was like, why is he calling me? And he called me, and he was like, let's say he was crying. And I was like, what's happening? Why are you crying? And then did you saw the news? And then I just opened notifications, and it was like 5-6 notifications. And then I just tried to talk to him, but it was, I think, a short conversation. And then I ended the phone call, and I was just sitting there, and I called my father also to tell him, and he was like, he was also speechless. I mean, that was definitely a sad moment. And even if, for my generation, we didn't remember him much. He wasn't a part of a club when I'm a part of a club. But that shows how much important he was, because somebody from the 60s, the 70s, the 80s I was born 20 years after him. He was a coach of the club, and he still has such impact. This is not something that you can act, that you can lie. That's the emotions that you have, and I think that shows. And the older people that I have contact with, they were also speechless on that day. A lot of people were fully emotional. They talked their stories. They have their jerseys. They were trying to find some old pictures of him. It was a super emotional day, and the funeral was everybody paid respect to him. And even from everybody came from the Belgrade, the players that he coached in the 90s, even some of his teammates, everybody who was important for football in Balkans came to the city that day.
I think I'm allowed to tell this, but my dad met him when he was already, he couldn't really walk much anymore, and it was getting hard for him to stand. And Sturm opened up some kind of legend club for famous players, and it was going to be a new thing, and all the members were going to be invited. And Ivica Osim was there as well, and two of his former players at Sturm who had retired were there with him, and were the ones in charge, self-appointed, to push him around in the wheelchair and aid him when he needed to move places, go to the restroom. And one of them told my dad afterwards, because he said, amazing, famous footballers pushing someone around here. And one of them, and I'll have to verify who this is now, but I believe it was Darko Milanic, said he did everything for me when I was a player. And when I became an adult, and now I'm trying to do as much as I can for him. It's not a usual coach-player relation either. So it's not just Osim and the fans, it's also Osim and his players.
I think it was definitely more. He was more than a coach to them. And he was more to the fans. He was more than a coach. To the clubs that he managed, he was more than just a coach. He's not just one of the coaches. He is the coach. And wherever he went, he left a strong mark.
If I was to come back 10 years from now, where would I find Željo on the field and off the field? And how do you think the Osim legacy will go on as the club changes, as football changes?
So the last title we won was in 2013. We were super dominant back then, so 12 years ago. If you ask me back then what will happen, how many titles will we have in 2020, I really hope to celebrate a title soon. For me, the club is not about titles. I enjoy going to the games. Even if you go to the second leagues, I will go with the same passion. I just hope that I can celebrate one more title as I'm young, let's say. And I hope that after I get my kid, and I hope he or she will support the club, that they will have a lot of titles to celebrate. But something that I'm proud of, we haven't won a title in 12 years. We are by far the club with the biggest attendance in the country, in top 5 in the whole region, and that's huge if you compare the giants around Yugoslavia. We have over 10k members, which was something unbelievable if you mentioned 10 years ago.
Still a member-owned club, Željo?
Yes, still a member-owned club. Will that change in the future? I don't know. Maybe it's a must, because the clubs around us, the Sarajevo, the Zrinski, Borac, they're not a members club. They're, let's say, private/country-owned clubs, and they have a lot bigger budget than us. Is that the way that the club needs to go to be successful? Maybe it is. Will we lose something if we go to let's say, a private club? probably we will lose something, but that's the modern football. To me, the club will always be the fans, the stadium, the history. It will be more than just titles, more than just wins. It will be still me gathering with my friends and my father 2 hours before the game, having a drink, going to the stadium. That's what the club meant to me 10 years ago. It means to me now, and it will me, and as long as I breathe, I will support the club. I will love the club.
And when and if you have a child, my guess is you'll take him or her to where you took me today when we first met as well at some point.
Definitely. I have a picture of when I was 5 days old. That's important. 5 days old. My father brought me home from the hospital. It's me and the scarf of the club. And that's he injected the club in me in that 25 years ago. And I hope that will never leave. The club will never leave me, I'm sure. And I hope my son or my daughter will have the same passion.
I can tell listeners that I called my dad from the grave where we just went, and said, "Bob, thank you for passing this on to me." And he said, "Yeah, I'm glad I infected you, but I don't think I pushed the needle in that far, the injection needle." And I'm thinking the fact that it went in this deep, to me, has something to do with living through Ivica Osim's time in Graz as well.
I think, but also, what I want to say is, you don't need the needle to be pushed so far. You just need a little injection.
It's enough. Yes,
and he just needs to go. He needs to take you to your first game. I think that's it. I think if you have it inside, it will stay.
We'll do a football parenting podcast episode.
But they first need to become a parent.
Thank you so much for the time and for a view into an unusual human being, unusual football coach, and into an unusual city as well. It's been an incredible experience to be here.
Thank you for the opportunity. This is my first podcast, and I'm really glad that it's about something I really love, something that is a part of me. And I hope you will have a chance in the future to come here for the game and to be able to stay in the city for a few days, because I'll definitely show you how the city breathes, what is a city. But definitely, if you come to the game with me, you will experience something. You will maybe see a part of Ivica there in the stadium and in the game.
It's the morning after my meeting with Nedim Hasanbegovic and Ivica Osim. I got up at 4 o'clock this morning, back in a rental car with my heart still full from yesterday, as they say. I walked around downtown a little bit, and people, if you are considering the Balkans, please consider Sarajevo. The mix between medieval and modern, between religions, between war and peace is vibrant. And I wish I had more time here, but I had planned to be in Celje in Slovenia for the Conference League qualifier game against Lugano this evening. So I'm driving the Opel Mokka rental back to Zagreb, then on train to Slovenia. Recommended dinner in Sarajevo, by the way, which is where Nedim sent me afterwards, is Cevaperia Geljo, frequented by Osim as well in the old town. And if you don't know what cevape are, look it up. Cevape, cevape. It's around 5:30 in the morning now. I just stopped in Zenica to take a picture of the massive steel plant here and got yelled at by a gas station owner for blocking a pump. I said something back that sounded vaguely Italian, and I don't know what exactly it was. I have no idea why I said it, but it's early. The highway's about to end here. Sun is rising. It's hazy, and the roads will be one lane and narrower, so caffeine is in order. I expect to be behind trucks most of the way to the Croatian border. And there is a lot to process from this journey as well.
Fudbal je situacija bez adresa. Und was wir ohne Fußball, das frage ich mich wieder, immer.
Football is something special, Osim says here. What would there be without it? I ask myself that all the time. 4 days after those moments in Sarajevo, after the game in Celje and after an away trip with Sturm Graz, I flew back to the US. I landed in Chicago, O'Hare, and was a little anxious about the border crossing. Last time I had crossed took a long time, an extra check with both of my girls in one line with all the visa holders. And this time there was a separate line for green card holders, now two separate ones. I picked the one with the friendlier looking agent. And as he called me up, I saw his last name on the uniform, Ahmed Begovic. Clearly a Bosnian name. Where are you coming from? He asked. Well, originally from Austria, I said, but I was mostly in Croatia and Bosnia this last week. Where in Bosnia? Sarajevo. I'm from there. He said, what did you do there? And so I told him, a short version. And he said, Ivica Osim? He was the best. And then he followed up and said, we have some things in common. We are both immigrants and we both like Osim. And he took down a link to my socials and we said goodbye. If you're listening to this, border agent Ahmed Begovic at O'Hare Airport, thank you. Thank you. And do say hi. How did Osim say it? I still believe that those who are connected through football, no matter what color or religion they are different. I think that football is in itself a little religion. Thank you, Professor.